So we talked a little bit in class about a very interesting way to try and parse an integer from a string and check that it's not going to throw an error. I overlooked a much simpler way to do this that I think would probably be better for you guys to implement instead of the way that I suggested. The way I suggested it using a try-catch block is fine. But this is a more reasonable way to do it. So here's the scenario we're given again. So you're given a string S, and you want to know if the string can be converted into a number or not. So in this case, we're only talking about integers for now. We might talk about something else in the future. But for it to be converted to an integer, if you think about a string, what it would need to have, the property it needs to have is that all of the characters in the string need to be numerical digits. There may or may not be a negative, but it has to be at the first position. And we can actually do that with all the tools we've seen in class. And I remind you that we haven't seen try-catch blocks, even though I thought we had. So we can do that just using the simple string, the string methods that we know about. Right? So here's exactly what it said on the last slide, but written in a little bit of pseudocode, right? So we're given some string S, and for each index I in S, we want to check if the character at I is a digit. If not, we're going to return false. So here's one example. We're given, say, 42, right? And I is 0 and 1. So the first thing we do is we check is s dot char at 0, less than or equal to 9, greater than or equal to 0, right? Because we know that characters can be compared in this way, right? And we say, is it between 0 and 9? Well, if it's not, then we're going to return false, right? If it wasn't, then it's not a number. Otherwise, we're going to keep going, and we're going to check the next one. We're going to say, is 0 less than or equal to s.char at 1, less than or equal to 9? It is. So if we get to the end of the string, I forgot to put it here, but then there's a return true, right? If we added a third thing here, so if we said x, so it's 42x, right? And we said 0, again, this is sort of pseudocode-y, right? You need to write this in normal code. Well, the character at 2 is not, so we would return false, right? So let's try one more example. What if we're given negative 73? So here's characters 0, 1, and 2. Well, we know negative 73 is an integer, right? It's a negative integer. So we go and we say character 0, so is 0 less than or equal to s.char at 0, less than or equal to 9. Well, no. But we know this is an integer. Well, it's that we need to add another clause here. We basically need to say, so again, our example was negative 73, 0, 1, 2. So we're walking down this and we say, check if the character is a digit. Well, this isn't a digit. So, well, if not, check to see if I is equal to 0. And if so, is the character the negative sign? If it's not, then you found something that's not an integer, right? Otherwise, keep going, right? So then you would check 7, you would check 3. Similarly, if it, if we gave it x41, x is not equal to that, so we would return false. Right? So that's how to check if it's an integer, right? You basically check that each character is valid. But what if we wanted to check to see if it was a decimal number? Well, integers are types of decimal numbers, right? So this works until we get to something that's, say, negative 1.43, right? It's this character that throws everything off. It's that negative, or the point. So we need to add in, well, if it's a point, if it's a dot, ignore it. But is that all we need to do? Because what about 1.4.3? That's not a decimal number. So we don't just need to check that it's either a digit or a dot. It needs to be the first dot that we've seen, right? So we're going to go through, we're going to check if each digit, if the character is a digit, we're going to keep going. If its index is 0 and it's a negative, we're going to keep going. If the character is the first period we've seen, we're going to keep going. If all of those are false, then we're going to return false, right? In that case, we're going to return false, and it's not a decimal number, right? So it's a little bit easier than using a try-catch block, right? Because we haven't seen how try and catch work. So this is the preferable way to implement this sort of, so in your lab, you might want to have a is int that takes a string, right? And you could fill it in with basically that. Right? Okay.